who have always worshiped in a kind of traditional Episcopal church walk in, and at first I think, my gosh, what's going on here? But the truth is, what we do is the Episcopal liturgy. It's just that we do it in all sorts of creative ways.
St. Paul and the Redeemer is growing because we're really clear about what we're about, and that's welcoming everybody to this community. Orthodox believer or skeptic, gay or straight, black or white, rich or poor, everyone is welcome to eat at God's table, and that is what drives so much of what we do. Hyde Park, Kenwood is a richly diverse neighborhood. Caucasians and African Americans about 50-50. It is a wonderful neighborhood where all kinds of differences push up against one another. Black and white, rich and poor, the most educated in the world, and those who are in desperate need of more education. Those mutual realities try to inform what we do, and we try to be welcoming of all of those people.
This church was founded in 1859. And this was an extremely upper-class neighborhood at the time. So it was really a church of the wealthy. And as the neighborhood changed in the 20th century, it went increasingly down. And there were times that were very tough. Also, the history of racism in this community, like a lot of Chicago, is very, very negative. It wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, until sometime in the 50s that black people could even live in this community, maybe even walk through it at night. So this parish in some ways was a pioneer in being a diverse racial community, although I will say in all honesty, it was because there were black people who challenged the white leadership of the parish that change took place.
The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to you.
When I came in 1998, the church was in trouble. Frank Griswold made his last call in the diocese here before he became presiding bishop and described this as a deeply troubled parish to the parish. They remembered that when I came. I kept hearing it. I think the biggest thing that happened early on was there was a sense that the people really couldn't do anything. They didn't have much self-confidence. So if I did anything during those first months at least, it was basically to say, you can do this, folks. You know, this is a great neighborhood. It's been a great parish, and we can make it great again. I mean, I think people were always welcoming here. I think they wanted to be welcoming. I think they wanted to be diverse, but they didn't quite know what to do. And so we began to find ways of really welcoming the diverse population that surrounds us. Up behind me right now, there's a crucifix, a large Christus Rex. The Jesus on that was blonde-haired and blue-eyed. All the symbolism in here was basically for white people. So we got an artist to come in and redo that. Many different things we did to reach out to the community. The music at that time was all early European music in a neighborhood that's about half African American. So the first major change that was made was the music. The person who had been the organist and choir director left. We found somebody who was very much about diverse music, a very talented person. That change, though, really signaled to people that this was not going to be just the same place it had been.
We seek to have excellent music, community-building choirs, but also diverse music, singing from the old Anglican standards, but also African-American music and music from around the world, anything to make it lively, make it fit our diverse context. If everybody can find something in the service where they feel comfortable, we think that people can really stick it out together and learn from each other's differences and make a richer community.
I never would have guessed that this would have happened, but we came up with the idea for this space and making it really reflect the idea of a community that's gathered around the table and the idea that Jesus is just as present in the gathered community as he is in the bread and the wine on the altar. We listened and listened and listened. We had many meetings. Everyone was free to express their point of view. The space was completely different. That crucifix hung in the very front. It was the most prominent thing in the church. We decided, among other things, that didn't need to be the most prominent thing. Not everyone loves it, and it's not very welcoming to non-Christians who come into this space. We kept it because it meant a lot to some people, but we put it in the back. Originally, there was to be an altar rail, but once we put the platform in, it so clearly made a much better statement without the altar rail. Everybody stands and looks one another in the eye as they receive communion, which I think makes a great statement. And finally, the real issue was the pews. People were very strong in their desire to keep pews. And we talked about the fact that certainly all the life that we share in this space is holy, not just the Eucharist. So wouldn't it be a great statement to make the space flexible so that you could have dinners and dances and all kinds of things here? And that's what really changed people's minds. People would get used to one of these changes. We'd say, what if we tried this? And they'd say, well, sure, you can try anything. And eventually, they began to say, well, maybe that wouldn't be so bad after all. If we had just made these changes without that, it would have been a very different situation.
Everyone is welcome to eat at God's table. We're intentional about how we do that, most obviously with our space. With the table is wide open. There's no barriers to the table, there's no altar rail, there's no steps, and we welcome everybody to the table every Sunday without exception.
If there's anybody here who is new, we have the welcome cards to fill out. We'd like to get to know you a little bit better.
St. Paul and the Redeemer really focuses our energies on Sunday mornings, and that's an intentional decision. First of all, because we think the Christian life is lived out in the world, that the way that people serve God's world is primarily in their vocations, with their friends, with their family, in the lives they live. And so we want to let them be out in the world. But also it's a way of using our resources wisely, that we put our energy into what we're good at, and that's Sunday morning. People at St. Paul and the Redeemer have a lot of friends at St. Paul and the Redeemer. And after church, we all go downstairs and eat together. And you'll see people that don't see each other during the week so happy to see each other and share a bagel or a cup of coffee and talk. Yeah. As we've gotten bigger, that's become more difficult, and a lot of people don't know each other. And some of the work of the clergy and the leadership is to let people know it's okay, that you don't need to know everybody, and encourage smaller communities to develop within the parish. Today is Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent. I wonder if anybody notices anything different about Lent. What's the candles?
We're gonna burn ashes.
That's right. Children are welcome in the liturgies to participate fully. We have 2 children's choirs, one for 5 to 7-year-olds and one for children 8 and above, that sing in our liturgies. They're not a cutesy little distraction, but sing real parts of the liturgy and help us lead our liturgy.
And God created all the green and growing things on all the earth.
We also do Godly Play, a wonderful Montessori-based children's formation program that values the relationship with God present in each child, but also forms it with the Christian stories of liturgy in the Old Testament and the New Testament.
And on the 6th day, God created all the living things that walk on the ground, all.
One exciting thing about this place is that we're willing to take risks. An example of that is me becoming rector. It's not typical that the assistant rector would become the rector, and it's not the safest path, but our community thought that it was the best way to keep this great thing we had going. This is the kind of church where people can go that don't know all the answers, and who can bring their stories, and we'll listen to them and accept them, and we'll challenge them and see if we can't grow together, but they don't have to believe a certain thing or act a certain way or dress a certain way to be here.
One thing about this community that I think really is distinctive is that no matter how strongly people disagree, they respect one another and they act respectfully toward one another. It's also about being a community that is really willing to take the risk of talking about things and believing that we can get through that and come out better on the other side, somehow be transformed. Even though it takes longer sometimes, and even though the leadership may know where it wants to end up when it begins almost, nevertheless, it's always a conversation, and no one is excluded from that conversation.